Well guys, it's time to talk about Lil Soda Boy because at this point he's come up in my videos so many times. I think it's only fair that he gets a video all to himself because he's been in the underground for about 10 years at this point, been putting in work, changing his music up, and a lot of people really seem to like what he's been doing. But just like many other members of the underground scene like Omen 13, Kami Yada, people start to forget about them as time goes on, and I don't think we should ever forget the history of SoundCloud and the people who really made it into what it is nowadays. So let's look into the story of Lil Soda Boy and get a little bit of a history lesson. Soda was born in the spring of 1999 in Washington to two very creative parents. His father was actually a published writer and his mother was a paralegal, which isn't inherently creative, but she did have a very strong love for music and planting that in her son's head at a very young age. She would often take him to live shows for bands that she liked, and even though Soda had no particular interest in any type of music, he really liked the idea of getting up on stage, performing, all the energy, the people, the lights, the sounds, and eventually that convinced him that he wanted to be a musician as well. And during one particularly defining moment during his childhood, one of the bands that he was watching would actually take him up on stage just because he was young and they thought it was novel to have a little kid dance around, but that really set in his mind that this is what he wanted to do with the rest of his life. Now when it comes to the rest of his childhood, it wasn't anything too out of the ordinary, but unfortunately he was suffering with some pretty extreme depression even from a young age, with one particular event taking place during his middle school days where he would actually tell his teacher that he wanted to take his own life after getting very upset. He was also not very good at making friends during this time because he always felt like he stood out just a little bit more than everybody else. Luckily by the time he made it to high school, he was able to bounce back and make a couple friends in different friend groups, and some of these people actually went on to become somewhat prolific in the underground themselves, like Wiggy, the videographer for Goth Boy Click, as well as another producer known as Anvil, who actually went on to work with our Lord and Savior himself, Cemetery, as well as Coldheart, but I mean Cemetery is a lot bigger than Coldheart, we already know this, right? But on a more serious note, it's kind of interesting to see so many people from this area go on to be prolific in the underground, all within the emo rap genre, but at the same time there was one person who went on to become famous for something completely different. That's right, Little Soda Boy is actually from the same area as Andrew Callahan, and even though they never really hung out, he would often listen to his music because Andrew actually used to be a rapper back in the day, and let's just say he wasn't a very big fan of it. And you can see Little Soda Boy actually left a hate comment on his video, and maybe this one comment completely changed the course of Andrew's life forever, making him into the famous YouTuber that we all know nowadays. So Little Soda Boy truly was influential even before he was making music. So when Soda Boy wasn't in school hanging out with friends or doing something else, he was often online discovering new types of music. He would discover electronic, jazz, and eventually SoundCloud rap, with two artists in particular really catching his eye, known as Lil B as well as Young Lean. Both of these artists are heavily influential in their own scenes, but some of you may not have heard of Young Lean, but basically think of him as a European version of Bones, very influential but very underrated at the same time. And Soda was eventually inspired to start making his own beats, combining all these elements together to make some very unique sounds, with his friends hopping on them from time to time, and that would teach Soda Boy how to engineer vocals and really put a song together. Unfortunately, as time went on, his beats would get more and more experimental, leading his friends to not want to rap over them anymore, so he decided to start rapping himself. This would lead to the creation of his first ever project, Baja Blunt Raps, which unfortunately is now lost. We don't even really have the track list to look into, so we don't really know what it sounds like, but his next project would be the first one to really start off his career. His next project was known as Carbonation and actually had a feature from Lil Tracy, and this is because the two of them were longtime friends before either one of them popped off, and Soda Boy even mixed and mastered one of his early projects called Heaven's Witch. During this period of time, Lil Soda Boy was really only making music in his room on a laptop, but eventually he would start going to a professional studio in Seattle, and he actually ended up meeting Tracy in real life for the first time there. And this led to the two of them performing together in Seattle, one time in a parking lot, which unfortunately there's no footage of, and a second time on an actual stage, which we can see here. And the two of them eventually became close friends, and I think they still remain friends to this day, but I can't really confirm that one way or another. By the time that 2016 rolled around, he was 17 years old, and he would start to get into drugs, smoking a lot of weed, and experimenting with Xanax, and this led him to eventually move out of his parents' house, going from couch to couch, doing different drugs, and living recklessly, and during this time, he would drop 3 projects. One of these projects was known as Starboy, which actually led to a little bit of tension between The Weeknd and Soda Boy, because as you probably already know, The Weeknd also has a project named Starboy that came out quite a few years later, and Soda Boy thought that he actually stole it from him. And this would lead Soda Boy to create a diss track on The Weeknd that unfortunately is lost at this point, but it definitely is a little piece of history that most people don't speak on that I find kind of interesting and overall just kind of funny. The other 2 projects that he would release in 2016 were known as I'm So Alone and Light in the Darkness. And each of these projects would have a big song that would go on to blow up Lil Soda Boy in the underground. The first one, I'm So Alone, had a title track by the same name that went on to get posted on Void Tracks and gain 1 million views overnight. And one of the tracks off Light in the Darkness, known as Helicopters, went on to become Soda Boy's biggest song to date. Gaining 50 million views after being posted on a story, but unfortunately for some reason it's not up anymore. I heard a couple rumors that there was a bit of fighting going on between Astari and Soda Boy, but I can't confirm that. There is a re-uploaded version that has 50k views, but the original version definitely had a lot more, and it was the first moment that Soda Boy really blew up in the underground. And after that, he ended up releasing another song with Tracy called Angels Around You, which was once again another big hit, but unfortunately the drug use was starting to wear on him, and it seemed like Soda Boy was getting more and more sick mentally and physically by the day. He would eventually take a break from drugs and start working at Starbucks, getting his mind in the right place and working on his next project called For Me With Love, which became a standout in his early discography, with a lot of fans heavily identifying with the themes and tones that he put into the project. And after that, he had a very strong, tight-knit community that would listen to everything he put out, which led into an interview on Underground Rising, which if you haven't heard of them, they did some of the most iconic early interviews for people like Lil Peep, It's Okay to Cry, Omen 13, and many other people in the emo rap space. Around the same time, he would put out his next project known as Eco, which had heavy influence from video game soundtracks as well as chiptunes, and at the time a lot of his fans weren't really rocking with it, thinking it was way too different from his usual stuff, but as time went on it aged better and better, and eventually TikTok would pick it up and it would start to blow up again years later, with one track in particular known as Plug Me In going on to get 8 million plays on Spotify and becoming one of Soda Boy's biggest songs. Unfortunately, around this time Soda Boy's sobriety would come to an end, with him meeting up with a small clothing brand known as Stacy's House, which was working with people like Travis Scott and Lil Peep, which gave them a lot of buzz in the underground scene, and Soda Boy, also having a lot of buzz around him for the couple songs that blew up in the past, finally decided to move to LA alongside them to try to pursue music as a full-on career. They ended up driving 16 hours to get to LA, and originally it was only supposed to be a 2-week vacation, and then Soda Boy was going to return home and start making music there again, but after he met Lil Aaron, who gave him a full-on place to stay in LA, he decided, why not, let's give it a shot. And of course, once you get to LA, you start making connections everywhere you go. Luckily for him, he already knew Lil Tracy from prior events, so he was able to meet Coldheart through Lil Tracy, and together the two of them would make a couple tracks. They ended up making 2 tracks called Goth Boy Loud Pack as well as I Can't Breathe, which did numbers in the underground scene, and then after that he would start to look to labels to find himself a full-on deal. And the label he discovered was known as Cortan. Now if you don't know who they are, they're basically the label behind Jumix, but they actually met Soda Boy before Jumix was ever in the picture. This label was basically made up of a bunch of rich Australian people who had previously worked with Billie Eilish, and now they had plans to make the next big SoundCloud rapper, and their initial plan was to sign Soda Boy, delete all his old music, give him a new haircut, make him look like a SoundCloud rapper, but Soda Boy didn't want to lose all of his creative freedom when it came to his music, so he decided to turn them down, which was probably a good idea because look what happened to Jumix. But after he turned them down, they would ask to buy a couple songs off of him. They didn't want anything new and decided on one of his old songs called Strawberry Blonde, giving it to their new artist, Mark Kissingjol, also known as Jumix. Soda Boy initially tried to warn them that if they took a song that was already released, a lot of people would realize, but they considered Lil Soda Boy such a small artist that his fan base would be inconsequential. But if you look at the comments on Billie Eilish, you can definitely tell that they were wrong about that, because almost immediately all of Lil Soda Boy's fans would jump into the comments saying that he stole the song, and after that the Jumix project basically fell apart because of that and a whole lot of other reasons. Check out my videos on Jumix if you want to know more. But either way, Lil Soda Boy ended up getting paid, and after that in 2021, after Jumix had already fallen off and gotten dropped from his label, he actually came back to Lil Soda Boy again to buy another song called This Time. But apparently Jumix didn't learn his lesson whatsoever, because once again all the comments were filled with people calling him out for taking another song from Lil Soda Boy that had already been uploaded. It's pretty crazy to think that Jumix ended up making the exact same mistake 3 years later. He bought another song after already being called out for it, so he never learns, he never grows, and that's why we love him so much. But let's get back to Lil Soda Boy. Even though his Cortan deal fell through, his connection to Lil Aaron would get him in the same room as an artist known as Black Bear, who I mostly know for working with MGK quite a bit, but he's actually a pretty big member of the whole post-punk scene with Avril Lavigne, Mod Sun, and all those type of artists. And because of that, he actually had his own record company known as Bear Trap, which was an imprint of Interscope Entertainment. The way that it works when an artist ends up starting up their own record company is usually they don't have the capital to fund it, so a bigger record company will get involved. The way that it works is that the main artist who runs the label still has a lot of control over the people that he signs, but the big company can get involved, and I think that probably scared Lil Soda Boy away. He still didn't want a big company controlling all his music, so he decided to pass on the deal. But not before Blackbear would hop on a remix of Helicopter. Unfortunately, it never got an official release, but it is still floating around on SoundCloud, so if you want to listen to it, you can probably find it. In 2018, he would drop 4 independent albums, with the most prominent one being called Cry for Help, which is notable because it's his first punk rock album, really showing that he was starting to move away from that emo rap sound and starting to do something completely different. But to be honest with you, almost every single album he drops is slightly different than the last. He definitely still has tones from emo rap, but for the most part it seems like he draws from different genres. There's hyperpop in there's punk rock, there's a whole lot of different stuff that really goes into his music, which often happens when somebody just has a love for music overall and they don't want to just solely be a rapper. They're able to take different influences and mix it all together and make something truly unique. In 2019, he remained pretty prominent, dropping 5 whole albums throughout the year, but a lot of fans started to worry that he was in a dark place, once again falling into his drug addiction and tweeting out a lot of concerning stuff. But luckily, Sodaboy was able to meet a friend known as Lil Narnia, who was a small artist he had actually worked with the year prior on the song Wipe Your Tears, but at this point he had already gained his own buzz and the two began to work on projects together. Narnia would appear on Lil Sodaboy's project It's Awful on the song On the Floor, which ended up being a pretty big hit for the two of them, and after that they continued to make tracks together. And one of these tracks was called See Through, which featured the artist Dylan Brady from 100 gecs, somebody that Sodaboy had actually worked with in the past who went on to gain mainstream attention. In early 2020, he would take a big risk by moving to South Korea for about 5 months' time, working with some of the biggest artists over there and getting a few of his songs to pop off on the Chinese app known as WeChat. He ended up dropping 3 more projects throughout the year, with the biggest of all of them being known as Lavender, which many fans still consider his best project to date, as well as critics really loving it, and to this day it's pretty well considered the quintessential Lil Sodaboy album. If you're going to listen to any of them, you have to listen to Lavender. By the summer of 2020, he ended up coming back to America, and then in 2021 he would drop 3 more projects, followed by a total of 8 projects in 2022. And it seems like he was really playing into that Chinese influence, because he ended up dropping a project called Today I Die, Tomorrow I Live, which ended up being released only in China on the WeChat app, although eventually it would leak in America on a channel called Archive TV, so the rest of the world was finally able to listen to it. And then he finally ended off the year by doing a small tour across Texas, which a lot of fans really appreciated because they hadn't really seen him perform since the pandemic. In 2023, he was finally able to kick his addiction to drugs, which is really nice to see because we've seen way too many fall to drug abuse in the past, so knowing that he's sober even to this day is really nice. Although his output did slow down a little bit in 2023, with him only putting out 3 projects, it seems like in 2024 he's back on business because he already dropped 2 projects within 6 months, and it seems like he has 2 more planned to release later in the year. With his most recent mixtape actually being hosted by DJ Fat, somebody who's mostly known for working with Netspend, but apparently he also worked with TK in the past, so that's a pretty big feature right there. And that pretty well brings us up to modern day, where he's still doing his thing. He's actually streaming Fortnite most days, and he's made a website called Epic Leaks, so it seems like he's really going in different directions while still making music at the same time. I'm not really sure what's going on with him completely, but it is cool to see an artist really switch it up and move away from rap. We see so many people still making 2017 emo rap in 2024, so knowing that he can switch it up and do different stuff is definitely appealing to most people. And to be honest with you, I really want to see him collab with Drippin' So Pretty. I feel like those 2 styles can definitely work out in a cool way, so that would be awesome if that happens. But if not, well, still shout out to Lil Sodaboy. Seems like a really cool artist who got heavily underrated in the underground. The man's been at it for 10 years at this point, and a lot of people don't want to consider his influence on the scene, which isn't too unusual. Most people only really care about you after you pass, but let's give Lil Sodaboy his flowers while he's still here and say, you know, shout out him. So what do you think? Are you a fan of Lil Sodaboy? Have you heard of him before? Definitely let me know in the comments below. Leave a knife emoji as well if you're part of Knife Gang. Shout out the gang. And let me know who you want to see next. Not to mention, I also have a second channel called Twisted Society, which I might actually be changing the name of soon, but either way, go check that out because I got a lot of stuff going on over there where I'm actually doing small news stories on the underground of the underground. So if you want to be part of the bullshit, the drama, and the antics, definitely go over there and subscribe as well because I'm trying to get that channel to 1K. But for now, that's it. Peace out. Talk to you in the next one, and maybe the next one will be Wavy Jones. I don't know yet. We'll have to see.